I'm an autism awareness angel, making sure my wings protect the different, the stranger than. I'm an autism awareness angel. It's good, cause I'm cool with the unique behavior. I'm an autism awareness angel. Will you accept me? Cause I accept you. I'm an autism awareness angel, cause the view from the spectrum is a better point of view. The question at hand.
Hi, I'm Tally, and welcome back to Autism 30. In the great words of Dr. Temple Grandin, there needs to be a lot more emphasis on what a child can do instead of what he or she cannot do. And I believe we parents need to remind ourselves of this as well. Someone told me a long time ago that this is a marathon and not a sprint. And just like any good marathon, there's pain involved, and there's at times during that race that you feel you can't go on, but you must if you want to cross the finish line and any chance of winning it all. And I think we need to remind ourselves to look into our child's eyes and look at the love, even if they're nonverbal, that's coming your way. Today on our Parent Talk podcast, we are going to be speaking once again to wonderful Kathy and Tina, who are joining us in studio. And we also want to remind you to click on the disclaimer button found on the autism30.com webpage, located in the Parent Talk box. I also want to welcome all those international countries that are joining us today and note that we really appreciate your listening ears. And if you have questions for our parent panel, please don't forget to click on the autism30.com webpage and click the word contact to send in your questions. And maybe we can answer those in a future Parent Talk podcast episode. Thank you, Kathy and Tina, and welcome.
Hi, Tally. Hi,
Thanks for having us.
So nice to be here again. Thanks for having me back.
No, it's great to have you two back in studio because we have fabulous questions that we received from our podcast listeners. So how about we just start off with the first one?
Okay.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, the first question that we have is, what do you do if your child is having a meltdown in a public area and you're getting the looks from other people? I mean, how do you handle that situation? We'll start off with Kathy.
Yeah, it's an awkward situation. First of all, I talk to my son very calmly and in a way that anyone that is standing and watching us and staring will understand that he's not a typical child, that he's not just, misbehaving and acting up, and that he does have special needs. And if they're staring at me, I have been known to stare back equally strongly until they actually catch me staring at them. Then they usually look away. But for us, that all said, I hate to say it, but I don't really go out on my own in public with my son. He's getting to be, he's 11 and he's much bigger and stronger. And if he does have a meltdown, they can become violent, and I don't feel comfortable handling him on my own. So the sad reality in our life is the two of us don't go out on our own much. That said, he goes out with his BIs, he goes out with his dad, and he's usually fine.
Yes.
I'm just a little bit paranoid, I think, because I'm the one that, if he's having a bad day, that he tends to take it out on. So
yes,
that's my story. But I do have the nasty stare down pat. So.
Which is good advice. And what about you, Tina?
I just want to give a shout out to the Center for Ability because right after we were diagnosed, I went to a communication workshop with them, and they gave me some invaluable advice that I'd just like to share. Basically, they said when you're not in the middle of one of those situations, when you're at a time when you're calm and thinking things through, to consider the different kinds of people that you might be interacting with in this kind of situation. So consider your family, close acquaintances, not close acquaintances, and strangers. And to also consider your own personal goals and communication. So are you the kind of person that likes to deal with things with humor, or do you prefer to educate people around you so they can have a better understanding of autism? Do you just want to get on with your day, get things done? Sort of what's your goals? And then realizing that some of those goals might be different for different people. So you may not feel the need to educate every stranger, but obviously close family, you will want to educate because you're going to have an ongoing relationship with them. So for each of those different kinds of people to kind of come up with a canned response, sort of a go-to response that you can pull out in those situations. We've all had experiences where you go somewhere and someone says something and you're all flustered and you're dealing with the situation, and you come home days and you're thinking about it in the shower and you're like, oh, I should have said this, or why didn't I say this, or why wasn't I brave enough to say that? So if you kind of have these like set canned responses, when you're in the situation, you can just pull it out of your pocket, deliver it, and then move on. And so you don't have both the flustered in the moment and you don't have to relive it later. And, you know, things may change as you go on. You may change your canned response, but it just does decrease the stress quite a bit. So that's really good. I've had less really sort of overt, rude sort of comments or looks in the public. My husband's dealt with a few more than I have. Although recently he dealt with one and I thought, oh, I can't wait to use this. The next time someone's really overtly mean, I wanted to say, like, does it feel good to bully the parents of special needs children? I think that'll just really shut them down. And I hope that never have to use it, but at the same time, I kind of can't wait to use it. I think it'll be fun.
Actually, that is a good response.
Yeah, because nobody wants to be called a bully, right? So if you put it in those terms, they'll really hopefully self-reflect on what they've done. And lastly, I just wanted to say too that there's kind of the idea of explaining. So just like Kathy said, sometimes when you're getting those looks and you're dealing with your child in sort of calming tones, they can kind of see that your child has special needs. But I would say earlier on, I felt the need to explain my daughter's behavior and to tell people, oh, I'm sorry, she has autism. And over time, I've just learned that I care less about that. And so I really just focus on my daughter and ignore everybody else. But I feel like it's an evolution. And I remember a couple years after the diagnosis, we were at a zoo in a different town and my mother was with me. And I really noticed the difference because my daughter was breaking some rules and I was just worried about getting her to follow the rule. And I heard my mom in the background explaining, oh, she has autism. And I really had a moment of self-realization that I had overcome the need to explain it to strangers.
Lovely.
But I wasn't upset with my mom because I knew that she just wasn't there yet because she doesn't live in the same town as us, so she hasn't had enough time or situations to sort of realize that doesn't matter. These strangers don't matter.
You know, I was graced with the fact that I never cared what people thought of me. And
Good for you.
So when my child came around and my child is having a tantrum and I am getting those looks, I actually don't even faze that these people are giving me dirty looks. I remember clearly a situation in Costco where my child was sitting in the stroller having a major tantrum, and I just calmly took the toy or whatever was in his hand and placed it to the side, and it was obvious we couldn't go through checkout, and I just walked gently to the front of the store and took him out of the basket, and I left the basket there with the stuff in it, with everything in it, and I just took him by the hand and walked out of the store. Now, and I want to thank the Costco people for placing the items back on the shelf, but I know that I'm sure there were people at that time which weren't too fond of what I did. But unfortunately, I think I've gotten a word by somebody where my son goes to school. There's a French term called a mère poule, which basically means kind of a helicopter mom, and unfortunately I've become one of those. And I care more about what my child is going through and what other people are going through. And that's kind of how I handled it. Now I know Tina, referring to what you were talking about before, that's great advice. And I've also heard, tell me if they also explain this to you as well, is that I know some people have almost pre-made business cards that explain what autism is.
I have some of those. I never put them in my purse. They're sitting on my counter, but I'm kind of torn with it. It's like I should have one there just in case I get flustered and can't cope with the situation.
I don't have.
Sorry
Sorry to interrupt. There's
No.
buttons too. And actually, I
buttons.
have to give another shout out to UPS. My husband at his work, the UPS driver came in and was wearing a button that says, "I have autism, be patient with me." And
That's
so
fantastic.
isn't that amazing? Yeah. And so
Wow.
it was interesting because his colleague then said to my husband, "Can you come over? I don't know how to deal with this guy." To which my husband thought, "What? Like, he's not wearing the button because he's an alien. Like, he just means that if he's not looking you in the eye, then don't get
Right.
frustrated with him."
Yeah.
Yes.
And then and that was what the situation was. The driver really didn't make eye contact and just wanted him to sign the thing and leave.
No
But
small talk. It was just straight to the point. Yeah.
But I was just, maybe this is a conversation for another podcast, but, this whole idea of the employers that are making an effort to employ ASD people
Absolutely.
and what accommodations they're making and I don't know if it's his choice to wear the button or, well, presumably it is, but, or if UPS offered it or what the situation was, but, so I am torn a little bit on the button too, but
I know that in a
Yeah.
future podcast, I will be interviewing companies that do make a point to hire people with autism. And I know, having spoken to some people already, what they wanted, I can't speak for them, but I think the common theme is that initially they believe they're hiring special needs or special people. And their expectations aren't that high initially, but what they're finding is that their special needs or special people that they hire actually supersede the typical people because of the level of focus and the level of dedication and the level of talent that these people have, which I think is fantastic. But yes, Tina, we will do another podcast relating to that issue. Now, to get on to a second question that we have, because I want to move on, is how do you cope if you want to go out to eat at a restaurant or a friend's house and your child has very picky eating habits? I know my child does. What about you, Kathy?
Well, that's easy. We don't go anywhere. Actually, we can go to McDonald's and we can go to food courts. Other than that, we have done restaurants where one of us will go ahead of time. We'll scope the menu in advance and know what gluten-free, dairy-free, again, for another podcast, items that they have on the menu. And then we'll place the order. And then when the food actually is arriving, the other, usually my husband will then come in with my son and we sit, we eat, we're finished, we're gone. And then I stay behind and clean up the disastrous mess and pay the bill and leave a big tip and go. But for the most part, we're still practicing with food courts and in the malls and finger foods, French fries, usually. And if we go to a friend's house, I bring my own food.
Yes.
I bring what I know he'll eat. And same with, birthday parties and things like that, where they're having birthday cake, I'll bring his own dairy-free ice cream along. And so that's his treat. And it works. It works.
Yes.
I would love to go to a nice restaurant as a family. That's one of my goals, but we're certainly not there yet.
And what about you, Tina?
Yeah, your question is specifically about being the picky eater, and the answer to that is we just bring our own food, and we've never had a problem with that anywhere. I guess the bigger question about going out to eat at a restaurant is just more of the behavioral challenges, right?
Yes.
And so I have a whole set of strategies around that, and maybe it's not quite on topic, but things that have come up. We used to sit in booths because we thought I could sort of corral my daughter, and she wouldn't be able to escape. But, she has a lot of movement and sensory needs. And so one of our therapists suggested actually just get a regular table with chairs and just pull her chair away.
Yes.
So she could stand and have a little bit of movement. And maybe that would stop her from running all over the restaurant. And actually, we've had some success with that. So
That's a great
that's just
idea.
a random restaurant fun fact, not necessarily about picky eating. And then, honestly, anyone who would have us over at their house understands the world we live in,
Yeah.
and would
Yes,
never
true.
judge us for bringing our own chicken nuggets and whatever. So, yeah, bring your own food.
Well, it seems like we all have that same
The same,
advice.
yeah.
And we do go out to restaurants, and my husband and I will order restaurant food, and my son will sit, and there's clearly signs over all his Tupperware type of lunch containers that says he's allergic to. And I think right now, with the litigation that goes on in restaurants, I haven't received one person ever complaining about the fact that
You brought your own food.
we bring our own food. So that kind of avoids that whole topic. And if people come up, like the waiter or waitress will come up and say, would your child like anything? I said, no, he's allergic to everything. And that way we don't have to get into diagnosis and
Right.
picky eating. They just feel sorry for him because he
Yes.
has quote unquote allergies,
Allergies,
which
yeah.
avoids the topic. So
yeah, no, it works.
Excellent. Good
Yeah.
advice.
So
Yeah.
you bring the food that they love wherever you go, and it really doesn't matter on the rest. And I think anybody that kind of has an issue relating to allergies or picky eating, then maybe we just don't necessarily want to support an establishment that does that. Now, to a third question that we have is, do you automatically tell others of your child's autism, or do you keep it private? And if you don't keep it private, who do you tell and who do you not? Kathy, what about you?
Who do I tell and who do I not? Well, I guess that's tricky.
It is.
I'm just thinking, who
And
do
that's
I tell
why
and who
our
do
pod-
Right. I'm not ashamed to tell people. I'm not embarrassed to tell people. So I quite often do say, to people I might meet, or if we're just chatting about, I don't know, your life or what you do or whatever, I'll
Yes.
say, yeah. And my youngest son has autism, so blah, 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 blah. So I'm not, I'll tell people and not be uncomfortable. I never talk about his autism in front of him, though.
Yes.
I know he's nonverbal, but he understands everything you say.
Yes.
Occasionally, if I have to talk about him in front of a therapist, I will, but I'll include him in the conversation. But as far as actually just telling the world that I have a child with autism, I'm fine with that. Absolutely fine with spreading the word. A lot of people have kids with autism.
Yes, I believe
Very true, yeah.
the stats are growing every year. And what about you, Tina?
Yeah, very similar. I'm very, very open about it. We keep a very open dialogue. I think it's important to destigmatize it, and I think keeping it private, though I don't know that it's anyone's intention, I feel like it works to add stigma to it. So
Yes.
we're open with everybody, yeah, I don't know that I keep it private really to anybody, but I would say to parents out there that, sometimes having that diagnosis is people worry about getting a label, and maybe they don't want to get a diagnosis or get testing because they don't want that label. But, sometimes, and for all reasons we can talk about another time, the benefits of getting that testing and knowing what you're dealing with, you always have the option to keep it private. So
Yes,
if your
you do.
child is diagnosed at 3 and then, by the time that they're ready for kindergarten, you feel like they don't need an EA or extra support, you don't want to share that diagnosis with the school, you absolutely do not need to. And so you should never let, worry about privacy be some reason that you don't do something that you might otherwise do.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, I've had not very positive experiences when we were first diagnosed. So I was very open initially with the people that I told, because in my head he has autism and that's fine with me. And unfortunately, when we kind of were originally diagnosed, I was telling people that I was associating with and had contact with, and unfortunately I was quite ignorant at the time because I thought everybody would be as educated or as open-minded as that I was, and all of a sudden I knew that some people didn't call for play dates anymore.
You know what, Telly, now that you're talking about it, yes, I have to say we experienced the same thing.
Yes.
We did. There were friends that we used to see regularly that we no longer
and that was it. So there were quite a few people that all of a sudden, and their behavior towards my child had dramatically changed. And unfortunately, because we got that negative reaction originally, I learned to keep silent about it and kind of make a decision. This was early on, so when my child did go to preschool, although I told his teachers that he had autism, because as a teacher myself, I found that they have to be made aware of the fact, but I told them specifically to keep the diagnosis private because I wanted people to get to know my child first before having the label out there because I don't think it's really children that he was associating with that would have had the problem with it. Unfortunately, I think it's older people and people that weren't necessarily exposed to people with autism as they were growing up, I think have very limited and not uneducated, that's ignorant, I'll call it ignorant views about what autism really is, and therefore place those kind of biases on their children. So what I ended up doing when he went to preschool is I ended up keeping it quiet. And then when they knew about my child and they knew who he was, then we kind of slowly came out of the closet. And I found that that's been our approach, in the sense that when we get to know you, I mean, obviously where my child goes to school, they know because they're in his life, but originally the student body didn't know until they got to know him, and I really specifically wanted it to be that way. But all the teachers knew. That was without a question. And we're kind of doing it that way. Like I know when my child does something, like he just did in our elevator the other day, where he told a gentleman, because he just noticed that he was bald, and he said, "Hi, bald man," and because of the fact that he was going to see him every day, I found that I had to kind of explain to him where that's coming from. He didn't mean it in a derogatory term, because he's our neighbor, a couple of doors down, so that needed explaining. So I will openly talk and educate on that front, so they don't, so you know, the interaction between he and my child won't be considered negative on that front. But I know that my child knows, for example, that he has autism and whatnot, and I think I think it's great what you guys are doing, in the sense that you're very open and you're very, you're out there educating and whatnot. And I just hope that there will come a time when we can all do that.
Yes.
I mean, a little bit of devil's advocate here. I think, like, for my daughter, there definitely has been people that have, like, backed off at the play dates and stuff. But is it because she has the label of autism, or is it because of her autism? So, you know, these kids, they would try to have a play date and it goes fairly disastrously. When she was early on, she might hit or bite, or she just can't play. And so those kids don't really, you know, they don't necessarily want to come over for a play date. So is it really that the label? I'm not sure. And to that point, you know, the same with going to kindergarten. Maybe it depends how impacted your child is. My daughter is pretty impacted. So those kids are going to notice she's different right off the bat. And so if I give them more time without sort of giving them any context or demystification or anything, then, and I'm just, you know, the whole concept of letting them get to know my daughter before I tell them she has autism, well, that might not be a great strategy, because getting to know her may just be establishing fear or scared, or you know, I don't want to play with that girl, she's weird. Whereas right up at the front, being open and educating from the very beginning about how all kids are different. That's just how she is, and that's okay. And so I think different strategies work for different kids depending on the situation and the environment and maybe how impacted your child is.
And to a point you said as well, which I think is absolutely great, is demystification in schools. The school where my child goes to, and I'm assuming both of yours, they did a demystification program, and it was beautiful. Yeah. And there's fantastic groups that will be interviewed on this podcast relating to demystification in school. And I agree 100% with your comment about it does depend on the situation, and you really have to play. You really have to be thoughtful as to how you approach each and individual situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know.
Can I just jump in with a happy little story at
Absolutely.
this point? Just talking about demystifications and, you know, your child looking different than the other kids in the class. We had several demystifications, and after our first one, which was grade 1, my son's EA was saying they were doing some kind of game, and they had to sit down next to each other, and she had was trying to get another little boy to come and sit next to my son, and he didn't want to sit next to him, and this EA is so sweet, and she just adored him, my son. So she was saying, well, you know, why won't you come and sit next to him? Why do you not want to sit next to him? And he said, because he kind of looks like a girl. Why is his hair so long?
That's beautiful.
And I loved it because
Absolutely.
it had nothing to do with the autism.
No.
It had nothing. It was, he looked different because maybe he looked feminine because his hair was long. But I thought that was
and he
really
does have
cute.
fabulous hair, but anyway.
Yes, he does. Actually, I want to make a point too. That's a great story, but I also wanted to add on to what Tina was saying earlier on about keeping things private from the school,
Right.
where you don't have to tell the school. If there's anyone listening in British Columbia, I do want you to be aware that yes, you certainly can keep it private from the school system. However, if you live in British Columbia, you'll be denying the school access to funds that you legally have the right to, that can facilitate getting more for your child in the school system.
Oh, absolutely. I don't generally endorse hiding it.
No,
I just
I know.
I just telling parents when they're diagnosed really young, 2 and 3, that you don't have to make those, like nothing you're doing now is going to definitely be one way or the other when you get older.
100%.
Yeah. And I have a cute demystification story too. We've had a couple demystifications at our school, and my husband witnessed a mother and not speaking English, but then the child was demystifying her mom about my daughter. So saying some of the things that she'd been taught and saying, what, you know, for her, it's like there's a ton of drums all the time in her head, and she's trying to understand all the different sounds and make sense of the world. And Mom, wouldn't that be really hard if that was your life? Wow. That's what she has to deal with every day.
Oh, that's lovely.
And it was so sweet.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think these kids really do take the messages we give them and carry it forward, and they can be our little ambassadors to their parents and their grandparents and
I think that's going to be beautiful. I think that's going to be beautiful. So really the next generation who have inclusive education and demystification programs and all of this, I think the next generation of kids that are going to be moving forward aren't those kids who have children with autism won't face the same challenges that we do as adults, because unfortunately our generation were never given these wonderful workshops and tools that were happened for the
no
kids.
Podcasts.
No podcasts. And actually, you want to know what? We are running out of time, believe it or not, ladies, and we're slowly reaching the end of this podcast. But I want to thank
that
you.
went by so fast.
I know, it really did. And I want to thank you, Kathy and Tina, for joining us today. Thank you so much for being here once again.
It's always a pleasure.
Yeah, I love it.
hanging out with you too.
Likewise. So I want to thank our podcast listeners for joining us once again. We also want to remind you to subscribe and join our mailing list on our webpage at autism30.com to receive information about upcoming podcasts and information. And if you're there and if you have a question to ask our parent panel, don't forget to click the word contact and send those in. And if you want us to mention your name and location, don't forget to give us the authorization to do so in your email. And if you don't want to, you can send in your questions as those who have for today's episode anonymously, and we will certainly try to address as many as we possibly can. Our goal here at Autism 30 is to help the autism community and to have our program better ranked on iTunes. I would really appreciate you writing a little comment and review us so that we can be better ranked at the top. And basically, it lets me know how I'm doing. Now, I want all our international listeners to have a fabulous day and know here in Canada that we really appreciate your listening ears. Once again, this is Tally telling you to live in love.
Hey yo, I'm an autism awareness